Welcome back to College Algebra Basics, and today we're talking about addition with decimals. So the big idea from last time was understanding what a number with decimals is. The big idea from today is to understand how to add numbers with decimals. This is probably best understood by thinking about an example. So let's start with the example of 3.4 plus 0.15. Now, there's a wrong way to do this problem, and let's do the wrong way first, because I always enjoy doing problems wrong, and then we'll see why it's wrong and how to instead do it correctly. So the wrong way to do this is to write it as so: 3.5 plus 1.4. Let's just do it just like that. Just to write 3.5 or 3.4 plus 1.5. Put the bar here. Add the 4 and the 5 and get 9, add the 3 and the 1 and get 4. And then we can put the decimal place, I'm not completely sure where. You might put the decimal place here and say 4.9. Or you could put the decimal place here and put 0.49. But regardless, both of these answers are wrong, and so do not do this. I'm going to put our big not sign on here. And why do we not do it? Well, we don't do it for two reasons. One, we don't do it because it's wrong, but two, we don't do it because it makes me sad, and it might make you sad if you get the wrong answer also. So this is not how we approach the problem. Instead, we have a principle that we use that you probably know, but let me just highlight it to you. The principle is that we always align the decimal point when adding. And so what's going on here is that we have a decimal point, and here our decimal point is in the second position, and here our decimal point is in, well, so here our decimal point is between the two numbers, and here our decimal point is to left of both of those numbers. That's not how we add the problem. So if I want to solve the problem correctly, what I need to do is try it again, but this time I need to take my 3.4 and my 0.45, and I need to align the decimal point so that they match. And now that the decimal point is aligned, I'm able to add them together. So let's draw my line. And now you see that we have 5 adding to, well, what is the number up here? The number is 0. We just didn't write it down. So we have 5 plus 0 is 5. So we have 5 hundredths. 4 plus 1 is 5. We have that decimal point here. And we have 3. And so this is the correct answer to our problem. 3.55. Before we just pat ourselves on the back and be happy with that correct answer, let's think about a little bit why we need to align the decimal sign. And I think if we think about why we need to align the decimal sign, if you understand the numbers, the nature of the numbers we're adding, then it might make sense, and you might never make this mistake ever again. Maybe once in a while. No. Our goal is to never make the mistake ever again. So let's go back through this problem. And this time, let's do the problem with our hundreds, tens, ones, and tenths chart, and hundredths chart that we had from last time. And so we have our hundreds, tenths, ones, tens, ones, tenths, and hundredths chart. And let's write both of these numbers down in terms of our chart. So what is the number 3.4 on this chart? Well, 3.4 means we have 3 ones, and it means we have 4 tenths. Now what is our other number, 0.15? Our number 0.15 means we have 1 tenth and 5 hundredths. So as you look through this problem, what you see is that our hundredths are in this column, our tenths are in this column, and our ones are in this column. So the real problem with the wrong answer that we gave before, you might say the problem was that we forgot to align the decimal. The real problem was that we were adding things that weren't the same. And this is going to be a principle that's going to follow us throughout the semester. So today, as we add decimals, we can only add numbers together if they're the same type, if they represent the same type of thing. We're going to get to fractions soon. And when we do fractions, we always find a common denominator. The reason is we can only add fractions together. We can only add them together if they represent the same kind of thing. And then later, when we get to algebra, we're going to be adding things that have x's or square roots or stuff together. And the answer is we can only add them together if they're the same type of object. If they're not the same type of object, we can't add them together. And so notice, can we add a tenth and a hundredth together? It doesn't make sense to add 4/10ths and 5/100ths and get the number 9, because it'd be 9 whats? Well, who knows? Because it can't be 9/10ths because you've added hundredths in there, and it can't be 9/100ths because you've added tenths in there. The answer is that it's 45/100ths, but that's not the same as adding 4 and 5 to get 9. So we're not adding 4 and 5, we have 4/10ths and 5/100ths. So we can only add things together when they are the same. And so what we can do is we can add all the hundredths together. And if we add all the hundredths together, we have 5 of them all together, because we had 0 hundredths in the first problem, 5 hundredths in the second. Similarly, we had 4/10ths in the first problem, and 1/10 in the second problem. So we have 5/10ths. We're going to put our decimal point right below where the decimal point was, because this column still represents the tenths column, and this column still represents the hundredths column. Finally, we're going to put 3 over here for a ones, because that represents how many ones we have total in the problem. So remember that golden rule. The golden rule is we can only add things together that are of the same type. And so in this case, we can only add things together if they're both tenths, both ones, both tens, both hundreds. You can't add things together if they're not of the same type. With that in mind, I want to ask you to try 2 problems real quick. Problem number A is add together 4.57 and 16.6. Problem B is to subtract 12.3 minus 4.3. I want to give you just a minute to try those 2 problems. I'm going to ask you, as I often do, to pause your device, take just a moment and attempt them yourself, and then we'll come back and maybe we'll work them out together. Very good. We're now back. Hopefully you've given these both a really good attempt. Let's look at problem A first and see if we get the right answer, and see if we can get the same answer that you got. If I do 4.57 and 16.6, what I want to do is put those together on top of each other. 4.57, but how do I want to align them? I want to align them so that the decimal points align with each other. So I'm going to write my 2 problems like this. I'm going to make it where my decimal points are aligned. And when my decimal points are aligned, it does a lot of nice things. It makes it where this column has all of my tenths in it, this column has all of my ones, this column has my tens, and this column has my hundredths. So as I've aligned the decimal point, now I'm ready to add them. If it helps, you can fill in a 0 here, just so that everything stops at the same left side. That's completely a matter of preference. Now as I add, I'm going to add, as I always do, from right to left, and so I'll add my hundredths together first, and notice that I get 7 hundredths. I'll add my tenths together, and notice that I get 11 tenths, and so you all know about carrying, so we'll take one of those there, and we'll carry it. What is a carry, really? Well, carry is that we had 11 tenths, and 10 tenths make 1, so we took 10 of them and grouped them together in the ones column, so that we now have an extra number in the ones column. It's really like we took our 11 and we ended up with 11 ones, and notice if we added 11 ones together, we end up with 10 ones plus an extra, and so this one moves into the next column next door. And that's really what a carry is. Similarly here, we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have 11 ones in this column. So I'll write one of those down, carry 10 of my ones over to the next column, and finally I get 20. So I have 21.17 is the answer I got for this problem. Let's look at our next problem and see what we get there. We have 12.3 minus 0.43. Again, if I'm going to solve this problem, I need to write it as a subtraction. I didn't specifically talk about subtraction earlier, but subtraction and addition are the same, different sides of the same coin. So we follow the exact same concept. And so what we need to do is align the decimals. So I need to align that decimal here. I need to do 0.43, and I need to put a bar below it. And now notice I've lined it so I can subtract tenths from tenths, I can subtract ones from ones, and etc., etc. I'm going to go ahead and put a 0 here. I think that's going to make my life a little bit easier. Now, as we do this problem, you'll have to remember some things back from basic subtraction, and the big principle is we have to remember how to borrow. Because notice, I can't take 3 away from 0, but what I can do is I can take 3 away from 10. And so what I do is I take this 3 tens, and I split them up into 2 tens, and then I make 10 of the smaller groups. So I have 3 tenths. There's 3 of those bars that look like a strip. So over here I had 3 of the bars that looked like strips, and I turned those into 2 bars plus 1 set of 10 little hundredth dots. And so 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I took my 3 bars, turned them into 2 bars plus 10 individual strips. And that's what borrowing is. Again, I think you all know how to borrow, but it's important to always remember the why, and it helps you not make mistakes. I can subtract 3 from 10 and get 7. I can't do this subtraction, I don't have enough, so I can borrow again. And I bring 10 ones down here to give us 10 tenths. That gives us 12 minus 4 is 8. Up with the dot, 1 minus 0 is 1, 1 minus 1 is 1. And so this gives us our next solution, 11.87. Well, I hope this little refresher helped bring back some memories on how to add and subtract with decimals. Next time we'll talk about multiplying and dividing with decimals. The rules will be a little bit different, but again, if you can understand what a decimal is and what it's representing, then it might make life a little bit easier. Thank you.